With the release of Jurassic Park's 30th year anniversary, and this month being Jurassic June, I decided to rank 50 dinosaur movies. This has to be probably one of the longest lists and rankings I've ever done on the channel, and I think I will ever do. But before we rank these movies, I just want to get my notes out very quickly. For one, this is my own opinion, so if your film is not mentioned here, I'm sorry, I might count it as a part 2. Secondly, I won't be ranking remakes or sequels, so unfortunately there's not going to be a lot of remakes or sequels on this list. Or at least I'll try not to put as many remakes or sequels on this list as possible. By the way, YouTube, this is fair use, so just so you know, all the footage in this video is full of stuff from the trailers, just so people know. And by the way, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to include Godzilla on this list, but that could be a ranking for another time. I'll try and make this video as quick as possible because we have a lot of films to talk about. Anyway, let's get to the ranking. This movie has to be one of the weirdest and worst movies I've ever watched. It stars Whoopi Goldberg teaming up with a talking T-Rex, and they're trying to solve a case to find and track down some dinosaur murderers. This movie is just a typical buddy and cop movie, but I don't think this movie is a so bad that it's good kind of film. This is just a terrible movie, and I don't highly recommend it. I do think the animatronic work on the dinosaurs looks really good in this movie, but you probably might have told, they do look a bit creepy and a bit uncanny a little bit. I just really like pausing the movie to get some of the facial expressions from these dinosaur animatronics. If you watch this movie, just spend most of the time pausing on any scenes with the dinosaurs to get those facial expressions, which you'll get some out of context looks from the dinosaurs. But anyway, this is just a boring movie. I did hear that this movie was in development hell when it first released. If any of you are interested in this film, I would highly recommend suggesting a video by Dino Diego, The Destruction of Theodore Rex, which does a deep dive into the development of this film. But anyway, shout out to the video if you want to check it out. I had to watch this movie on YouTube because there was no other releases on DVD or anything like that. So as you tell, the quality looks really bad. And well, the movie is bad itself. It was released 1 year after Jurassic Park in 1994. The movie does have an interesting story, but its dinosaur effects look extremely bad. Like, they use a Dino Riders T-Rex toy for some of the scenes, and they use some crappy puppets in stop motion. Probably some of the worst dinosaurs I've actually ever seen put to film. Anyway, let's just move on from this mess. It's Alive was a movie that came out in 1969. The movie's not really that popular or nothing really that special, but the creature looks terrible. Apparently this is supposed to be a Mosasaurus, which is a new made-up creature for the film. But it kind of sounds like it's a Mosasaurus they're talking about, which, yep, this thing looks nothing like a Mosasaurus. I mean, it looks a lot like the creature from the Black Lagoon. But anyway, the acting is actually surprisingly okay, but the movie is just not that good. The monster looks terrible. I wouldn't really recommend this one for anyone. First thing I want to mention is that the special effects look very bad. They look very terrible. Not the worst CG I've ever seen in a film, but they still look very bad. Now, they're not the worst dinosaurs I've seen, but there's a lot of terrible effects here, like the dog here, which is the talking dog, which, yeah, talks. I don't know why. This movie is just hilarious to watch. I mean, it kind of looks like they had a lot of fun making this film, but this is just not really the best dinosaur movie for me. Anyway, let's just move on here. At the Earth's Core is a very strange movie. This movie stars Doug McClure and Peter Cushing, who do great jobs in this movie. But the rest of the movie is, it's not too great. The dinosaurs in this movie look horrendous, and they are not paleo accurate to how they're supposed to be. Yeah, that's supposed to be a Ramphoraicus, by the way. Also, this movie really likes blowing up dinosaurs. I mean, every single dinosaur death, it always gets blown up, which honestly is pretty cool, to be honest. This movie is not really that great, and I don't really that much recommend it to people unless they're interested. Now, this is the only Asylum film that I have on this list, but Age of Dinosaurs is also another pretty terrible movie. Most of the actors weren't really trying in this movie, or maybe that is except for the main villain, who's actually the villain in RoboCop for the film. But, in my opinion, the dinosaurs, of course, they have CG and they're not too great. I'm glad I skipped Triassic World for this list. This movie is an okay film, but it just looks very, very terrible, especially with the dinosaur effects. I mean, just look at the dinosaur effects in this film. This is supposed to be a Ceratosaurus. To be honest, the scene in Jurassic Park 3 where the Ceratosaurus eats a dinosaur's poop is probably more interesting than this entire movie. I mean, it makes sense for a film that's budget is on $400,000. But anyway, let's just skip this one. This one's probably not one I would really recommend to anyone. Now, technically, this movie doesn't have really a lot of dinosaurs in it. It's just one of the animatronic dinosaurs. It's still credited as a dinosaur movie. This movie is very, very strange. It stars a young Paul Walker, which rest in peace, who gets killed, and his brain is transplanted into an animatronic T-Rex. But the animatronic T-Rex comes back to life and starts killing people until he gets some help from his girlfriend, Tammy. Back then, this movie got a PG-13 rating, but in 2019, the uncut rated version, the R-rated version, which contains a lot of blood and gore in the movie, was released to the public. To be honest, I don't really like this movie. I just think it's kind of trash. But it is the first dinosaur movie that we see a T-Rex point the finger. Well, we have another movie starring Doug McClure that has dinosaurs in it. This movie's based on the book by Edgar Rice Burroughs, I'm pretty sure. Sorry if I butchered that name. This movie is mostly a fantasy movie, but it does have dinosaurs in it. Most of the dinosaur effects are okay, they're not the best effects. The acting's also not that good as well. Anyway, this is just my least favourite Doug McClure movie in my opinion. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why aren't you including the new Super Mario movie? Well, Wikipedia and IMDb said it was a dinosaur movie, so anyway. But the original Super Mario Bros. Movie is crap. Not like the new one, which the new one's great. I mean, this one is okay, but it shouldn't be a Mario movie. It should be something else. That's the only problem with this movie, is that it's relating to Mario, and it doesn't look nothing like Mario. So I think the recent Mario movie we got was much better. Don't watch this movie, it's all a lie. There's no two Lost Worlds. It's the stock footage from the next movie I'm going to mention. So let's just move on from this mess. This is probably one of the most recognizable dinosaur movies out there. 1 million BC, not to be confused with 1 million years BC. I mean, this dinosaur movie is everywhere. I've seen this in movies and so many other stuff before, and so many in other dinosaur movies as stock footage. This is one of the first movies to use Slurposaurs, which is basically using real life animals but put crap on them to make them look like dinosaurs. And as you can tell, yeah, this is animal abuse. And well, I'm not done with talking about Slurposaurs, because we have The Lost World from 1960. Basically the remake to The Lost World, and basically a remake to the book of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost World. This movie is really strange. I do like some of the acting, but the rest of the movie is just quite terrible. And the effects, of course, using the Slurposaurs, just looks not really that too good. Now, I do really kind of enjoy this film, just a little bit, but it's not one of the best movies of all time. I don't recommend it. I only seen the Mystery Science Theater 3000 video on this one. Which, watching the movie, this probably has to be one of the most boring dinosaur movies. I mean, it has people just rock climbing up mountains and stuff. The dinosaur effects, in my opinion, look good, and that's what really saves this movie. But to be honest, it's probably one of the boringest dinosaur movies, just because you get to see lots of rock climbing in the movie. So I wouldn't really that much recommend this one to anyone. I haven't watched this movie in a very long time, but what I can retell, this movie was really boring. And I know what some of you are saying. Oh, it's a children's movie. I mean, this came out the exact same year as Jurassic Park. That means that kids will only be able to see this film except for Jurassic Park. Which, yes, I get that opinion, but this movie just didn't well for me. I do like the dinosaur effects, but other than that, this film's just boring. Well, it looks like I am not done with another dinosaur movie released the exact same year as Jurassic Park. Dinosaur was made by Roger Corman, and it was released a month before Jurassic Park in 1993. This movie is garbage. I know lots of people compare this to Jurassic Park, even though the plots are different. There are some Jurassic Park references in this movie, but it's not about a theme park with dinosaurs, so I can easily get that. The only good thing about this movie is that it stars Diane Ladd, which, guess what, if you didn't know, was actually Laura Dern's mother. You know Laura Dern, who played Ellie Sattler in Jurassic Park? Oh yes, the Walking with Dinosaurs series. Oh wait, this is the 2013 Walking with Dinosaurs movie. This movie isn't bad, but one thing I just don't really like is, the voices added to the dinosaurs, which apparently they were forced by 20th Century Fox in order to add the voices in. Well, that's why I think, because Fox, is a very strange company with their dinosaur movies, and they know to do a lot of terrible things with them, but I don't like the voices added onto the dinosaurs. In my opinion, I recommend getting the Blu-ray version, which actually has no voices to it. That will be a lot more better than the actual final film. Ah yes, The Land Unknown. Probably one of the most weirdest dinosaur movies out there, and probably one of the most hilarious dinosaur movies out there as well. I mean, the acting's fine, but the effects just look very terrible. I mean, look at the T-Rex. I mean, it's just so laughable. Not meaning to, like, really bash the creators on this movie. I would say I actually kind of enjoyed it because it was more of that B-movie style. But overall, I don't really recommend this one. Based on the Jules Verne book, Journey to the Center of the Earth, this movie doesn't really have a lot of dinosaurs in it, except for the Dimetrodons, which also uses the Slurposaurs. But this time, this movie is alright. I mean, it's not the best movie, but it's okay. Last Dinosaur was a TV movie from 1977. Apparently, this movie was supposed to come out in theaters, but they changed it to going it to TV for a TV movie. One thing that's actually good about this movie are the dinosaurs. They're used by Suit Motion, which is what they use for the Godzilla movies, and this reminds me of Godzilla. By the way, the T-Rex actually makes some Godzilla noises in the film as well. I'm not going to go about saying it's a good film. I mean, the acting's pretty bad, and the movie isn't really that good. I mean, I don't recommend this one for any, like, film critic or anything like that, but if you are interested, it is good. Definitely recommend checking out. Now, this is one movie I remember seeing in theaters when I was little, The Good Dinosaur. This movie was released the same year as Jurassic World, probably to make another younger film for the younger people out there to see a dinosaur movie. This movie is quite bad viewing it to this day. I mean, the story is okay, it's just a Pixar movie, but to be honest, the characters and the dinosaurs, they don't look too great. Anyway, that's just my opinion. While this isn't a good movie in my own opinion, I still think some of the effects look pretty good, but some of the scenes just look a bit outdated to this day. Plus the story isn't really anything new. I recommend it if you're interested. So we have the beast from this isn't the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. This looks really similar, but it's the giant behemoth. This movie is forgettable. This is an alright movie, and I do like the acting. And of course, I am a huge fan of that dino stop motion, or that giant monster stop motion. But this movie is just boring. This movie also has a very slow pace, and the monster's not that good, which is really unfortunate because this movie should have a good monster in it, but unfortunately it doesn't. It feels a bit like the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, but very differently on the new take on it. This movie I actually do kind of recommend, but I recommend just seeing it once. It's just a normal, typical giant monster movie. That's pretty much it. Dinosaur and the Missing Link was one of the first ever dinosaur movies to ever be brought to life, and it was the first launch of the career of Willis O'Brien, which was one of his first dinosaur movies he ever did. The movie is a 6-minute comedy that was distributed by Thomas A. Edison's film company, Conquest Pictures. This movie isn't too well known these days, and it is one of the first Willis O'Brien, one of the first dinosaur movies ever released, or one of them. Anyway, I do recommend checking this one out. The only problem is that it takes a bit too quick. Here's another children's movie that came out the exact same year as Jurassic Park. That's We're Back, a Dinosaur Story. This movie is quite a weird movie, but it is worth checking out, and it stars John Goodman as the main T-Rex, which if you do know, he was in Kong Skull Island. So, I mean, this is an alright film, a bit too dark for a kids' film, just a little bit, but fine film. The Creator Lake Monster is probably one of the most weirdest movies on this list, or one of them, not exactly one of the weirdest, but it's pretty much kind of like a giant slasher movie, but with a giant plesiosaur in the film. I think the creature effects do look really cool, even though it's not Ray Harryhausen or O'Brien stop motion, it still is really good. Anyway, I do think the acting's a bit stale, and this movie doesn't really have a lot to offer. Of course, it's free on YouTube, so if anyone are curious to watch this movie, then it's free on YouTube. Beast of Hollow Mountain is a very interesting movie, just because this was actually one of the first movies that dinosaurs and cowboys have ever met together on screen. Yes, before the Valley of Grange, we had the Beast from Hollow Mountain. This movie is a very entertaining movie, and I do like the dinosaur in the movie, which is a T-Rex that keeps on eating cattle. Anyway, I do recommend this movie. Along the Moonbeam Trail was again one of the first dinosaur movies out there. This movie, to my stop motion, was all done by Herbert M. Duoley, with all the other dinosaur stock footage from The Ghost of Slumber Mountain by Willis O'Brien. Now, I'm not too sure if this is really a dinosaur movie, but because I include the original one, guess include the remake from 2008. Journey to the Center of the Earth is It's based off the book by Edgar Rice Burroughs, which I did mention that in the previous one, but the new 2008 movie stars Brendan Fraser. Except for Dimetrodon, which was featured in the original movie, this one has a Giganotosaurus, not a T-Rex, which is really interesting. Now it's time to talk about the newest dinosaur movie, 65. Now I'm not going to ramble about this one too much, because I already made a review about it, check it out on my channel, but yeah, this movie's pretty mixed. It's not one of the best dinosaur movies, but so far, I think this movie is definitely a lot better than some of the other dinosaurs on this list. Now, my opinions on this film have still not that much changed. I think it's a bit of an okay film. I still rate this one probably a 5 out of 10. So, anyway, I haven't checked this one out ever since I've watched it in theaters, so that I might have to rewatch it. Now we're getting into some good stuff. Planet of Dinosaurs is a film from 1978, and is pretty much a B-movie and a cult classic to this day. The movie back then was pretty much a rip-off of Star Wars, as this movie came out 1 year after Star Wars. Anyway, the dinosaur effects look really cool. Even though it's not Ray Harryhausen or Willis O'Brien, they're still really good effects. The acting is cheesy, but the dinosaurs is what you came here to see for. Even the Eretosaurus shows up in the film. The Ghost of Slumber Mountain is another one of the first dinosaur movies to be brought to screen, and the first movie to start Willis O'Brien's career. Here's another movie I have talked about on my channel, and that is Land of Lost. Based on the 70s TV show by Sid and Marty Krofft, Land of Lost the movie is okay. I mean, it's a very mixed movie. There's some good things about it and there's some bad things about it, particularly the childish comedy that the movie has. Will Ferrell pretty much acts like a bit of a child in this movie, pretty much screaming around and saying pretty much so many unfunny things. While it's not the worst, because I have seen Will Ferrell in his worst performance, he still is alright in the movie. While the effects are nothing new, they're just CG for the dinosaurs, they still look really fantastic. If you are interested in this movie, I do recommend checking it out. It's obviously not the best dinosaur movie, but it's also not the worst dinosaur movie. I mean, the original TV show was obviously more campier than this, but still though, if you are interested in this movie, then I probably would recommend checking it out. Caveman is a comedy movie from 1981. The story isn't really anything that new and is more used in other caveman/dinosaur movies, but it still is an alright story. I also don't really think the comedy was really that well in the movie, but still though, it's a caveman movie. All I really like about this movie is the stop-motion dinosaurs by Jim Danforth, which are really excellent effects. I really like the stop-motion T-Rex and some of the others. Anyway, I do recommend this movie a bit. I remember seeing this movie on TV once when I was a kid. This movie was directed by the same person that made The Blob, the original one from 1958. I really like the stop motion, even though it wasn't done by Ray Harryhausen or Willis O'Brien, still are very awesome effects. Also, I think this was referenced many times in other dinosaur movies that came out after this movie, like the whole lightning strike scene, which was basically similar to how King Kong and Godzilla get broken up. If you haven't watched Dinosaurus, then I do kind of recommend checking it out for yourself. I know this movie isn't a movie, it's more of a 10-minute short movie, but I didn't want to leave this one off the list. So anyway, let's take a look at Animal World by Ray Harryhausen. This was a 10-minute short film made in 1956. This was definitely in Ray Harryhausen in his prime, and was the first time that we pretty much ever saw Ray Harryhausen edit dinosaurs or make stop-motion dinosaurs onto the big screen. Unless you want to count the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms as being a dinosaur, but not really. Anyway, this was also the first dinosaur movie, or one of the first dinosaur movies to ever actually show colour to it. I also like how they recycled some of the dinosaurs for the film, and they used it after another Ray Harryhausen movie, such as the Ceratosaurus. Anyway, if you haven't checked out Animal World, I do recommend it, even though it's rare to come by these days, and it's only found on the internet. Oh, I don't mean the iconic ending to Jurassic Park, where after the T-Rex finishes the raptors off, roars, and the iconic "When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth" sign pops down. I don't mean that. I mean the movie When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. Very similar to 1 Million Years BC, but it's a totally different film, and was produced by the same company, Hammer. While not being the greatest dinosaur movie, and especially not being as good as 1 Million Years BC, I really love the stop motion, which was done by Jim Danforth and not Ray Harryhausen. These effects actually still look incredible, and I also do think that these effects might be a bit better than Ray Harryhausen's effects in 1 Million Years BC. I'm just kidding, nothing will beat 1 Million Years BC in my own opinion compared to this movie, but it still was a fine film, and I do recommend it. This was again by a book by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and that's The Land That Time Forgot. This movie stars Doug McClure, and it's probably one of my favourite movies starring Doug McClure. The story and the acting is actually really good, and I also do like the dinosaur effects to it with these puppets. And in my opinion, the puppet effects are probably some of the best puppet effects I've seen on the dinosaurs. And yes, it is kind of cheesy, but still though, they still have a charm to them. If you want to be entertained with a dinosaur movie where the dinosaurs are puppets, then I think this is one movie I definitely recommend checking out. I remember watching this movie back when I was a very, very tiny kid. That is the Ice Age 3, The Dawn of the Dinosaurs. I used to watch this movie a lot, that's like Land Before Time and Dinosaur. This one is the third Ice Age movie, and it's the first Ice Age movie to include the dinosaurs in it. Which, I'm guessing the dinosaurs did show up in some other future sequels to the Ice Age after the third movie. But in my opinion, this is definitely superior compared to all the other Ice Age movies, and is my favourite. This one I do recommend watching as well. Now we're getting to probably one of the first dinosaur movies to ever be brought to screen, Gertie the Dinosaur. This was one of the first animations starring a dinosaur in it as well. This animation was done by Winston McKay, and Gertie the Dinosaur would be the first ever movie to use a different animation-like technique, which is used nowadays in a lot of movies. This short film is easy to watch on YouTube and it's not hard to find, so I definitely recommend checking it out. This movie might have to be one of the most important movies of all time. This is probably another one of the greatest things that I've ever seen from Disney, in my opinion, especially back in that time, and that is Fantasia, especially one of the shorts called The Rise of Spring, which in my opinion is probably one of the best dinosaur media from back then. There isn't really a lot of story with Fantasia because it's mostly a movie about what life was like when dinosaurs ruled the earth, but still though, it's still magnificent. I really love the animation, and this was the first movie to ever bring animated dinosaurs to colour, which is awesome. At the end of the story, all the dinosaurs died by heat, which is inaccurate to the asteroid discovery, which wasn't until 1982. So back then, people thought that the dinosaurs died by heat. But anyway, this is still a fantastic short, and I do recommend this one to anyone. If you haven't checked out Fantasia, I do recommend it. Also, I recommend watching all the other shorts because they're really great. This was definitely Disney in its great years. Anyway, I do recommend it. On to the top 10. I know that this might not be the most popular movie on the top 10, but in my opinion, I do really enjoy The Dinosaur Project. It's in the same style as Cloverfield and the Blair Witch Project, which basically is the found footage use of the film, which I know is something I know a lot of people really like, but in my opinion, I think this is what really sells the movie well, is this found footage to it. It's also got some great characters and good acting, and I also do like the dinosaurs. Even though they look a bit inaccurate, they still look pretty good. Anyway, this is a film that I do recommend to people if they haven't seen it. Now this is going to be short because this isn't really a full-length movie, it's a short film, but Prehistoric Beasts I do recommend to anyone. This is a short film by Phil Tippett, which was going to use Jurassic Park, who was going to be the dinosaur supervisor for Jurassic Park and it having stop-motion effects to it, but eventually, of course, we all know it didn't happen. But I do recommend this one because this is a very good short film, and I honestly really like it. I was actually inspired by this movie when making my Triassic Lego stop motion video. So anyway, this is available for free on YouTube if you want to watch it. So there you go. This movie is credited for being one of the first dinosaur movies to put to film, and while it is, it's not really the first dinosaur action movie ever made. But anyways, The Lost World was released in 1925 and was based on the book by Sir Arthur Doyle's The Lost World. And, well, I think these effects definitely look better than the other Lost World. I mean, this is an important movie because it actually brought the first dinosaur effects to life. The stop motion was all done by Willis O'Brien, which you probably know him for another film that's coming on the list. But anyway, this is such an iconic film and has inspired many dinosaur movies to this day. I certainly recommend this movie to anyone who hasn't seen it. This one's another one of my favourite Ray Harryhausen movies of all time, 1 Million Years BC. I think most people were inspired by this dinosaur movie, and it's probably one of the best dinosaur movies out there. Basically, this is a caveman movie, but it also has some cool stop-motion dinosaurs in it, brought to life by Ray Harryhausen. I just love the iconic scene where they fight the T-Rex in the scene. It just looks so awesome. Of course, it stars Raquel Welch, which also rest in peace just recently. which back then was very attractive. This movie also has caveman fights as well, which is really cool. Most of this movie is really awesome. Some of the acting in the movie is okay. I mean, some of the acting does get boring over time, but they're just acting like cavemen in this movie, so I get why. Anyway, I highly recommend 1 Million Years BC to anyone who hasn't seen this movie. I recommend checking it out. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was a short book by Ray Bradbury, who made a short story about a giant monster that attacks a lighthouse. Then, in 1953, created probably one of the best dinosaurs and most recognizable dinosaurs or giant monsters of all time in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. The story is quite similar to Godzilla, but it came out 1 year before Godzilla, so that means I guess Godzilla's kind of a rip-off of this movie. But anyway, I absolutely love this movie. I love the Eretosaurus being a new dinosaur that's not actually a dinosaur, it's made-up creature. And I also like the message to it with the atomic bombings. While similar to Godzilla, it still is really awesome. I'd recommend this one to anyone who hasn't seen it. If you haven't watched The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, give it a look, because it's definitely kind of like Godzilla, but a lot different. Man, this movie brings me back so many childhood memories. Disney's Dinosaur, I think most people will probably remember this movie, but this movie is really great. Now, it is kind of similar to The Land Before Time, which I guess why everyone doesn't really like this movie, but in my opinion, this movie is awesome. Yes, I know most people might not like the whole dinosaurs talking thing, which is quite similar to Walking with Dinosaurs, but at least we get some cool villains without dialogue, which is the Carnotauruses, which, man, these are probably some of the best dinosaurs I've ever seen put to screen. I mean, these Carnotauruses, they beat the new Jurassic World Carnotaurus. They're just so amazing as villains. Anyway, this movie is great. I love all the visuals and cinematography to this movie. This is actually one of my favourite Disney movies of all time. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking it out. The Valley of Grungy has to be one of my favourite Ray Harryhausen movies. Originally made by Willis O'Brien, but never got the project done because he sadly passed away in 1962, Ray Harryhausen got the rights and so made his own movie. In my opinion, this movie is amazing. I just love this movie. I love the setting to it being in this Wild West town, and I really love the dinosaurs. There's some of the greatest stop motion here. I especially love Grungy. This is also one of my favourite dinosaurs I'll put to screen of all time. I also really like some of the other aspects of the film, like the little horse that is in the movie. And to be honest, I absolutely love the scene where the cowboys are lassoing the Allosaurus Grungy. If you haven't seen this movie, I do recommend checking it out. It's probably one of my favourite dinosaur movies of all time. Similar to Dinosaur, Land Before Time is my favourite dinosaur movie when I was a kid. This is probably one of the best movies I've ever seen, or one of the best cartoon dinosaur movies, that I've ever watched. I mean, it's so emotional, and it's definitely a great movie. I especially love Sharptooth. That's probably one of my favourite dinosaurs put to screen, which most of these top 5 have great dinosaurs in the movies, which is why I like these movies on the top 5 list, just so people know. All the dinosaurs and this cartoon style look really good, and I really love the land itself. It just looks really awesome in the cartoon. This is definitely one of Don Bluth's best movies, and I really love this movie. This movie is part of my childhood, and it's probably one of the first dinosaur movies I've ever saw as a kid. That and also Dinosaur. These both are probably some of the movies I remember from my childhood and one of the first dinosaur movies I've ever watched. So anyway, I just really love The Land Before Time. Definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't watched it. Now we're talking about the 8th wonder of the world, King Kong. This not only is one of the best movies of all time, but it's one of the best movies in culture of all time. I mean, without King Kong, I don't think we'll have these movies these days with so good special effects. Back when King Kong was released in 1933, audiences were wowed. And in my opinion, I think that King Kong has to be one of the best special movies with special effects these days. I know that we're getting a lot of CGI things these days that look better, but in my opinion, back then in 1933, King Kong literally wowed audiences with these effects. And I know they look a bit outdated to this day, they still look amazing. I especially love the scene where King Kong's on the Empire State Building fighting off the planes. It's such an iconic image that I think most people wouldn't really that much remember back then. And in my opinion, if you haven't seen King Kong, I definitely recommend checking out the original or the 2005 movie if you have the chance to, but the original is definitely what made cinema in general. I hope to talk more about the original sometime these days, but so far, I definitely recommend checking this movie out. Alright, number one, I think most people know, without any questioning, you can all scream it out on screen on what's number one. Alright, it's Jurassic Park. No, that's the end of the video. Jurassic Park's obviously number one. I don't think any film or any dinosaur movie will be able to, beat Jurassic Park. It's one of the best dinosaur movies of all time. It's even one of the greatest movies of all time. I mean, John Williams' soundtrack is amazing to the movie. And Steven Spielberg's directing's amazing. The dinosaurs by Stan Winston look amazing. And I really want to thank Michael Crichton for making the story in his novel. Because it's such a good book, you should check it out. And also, I do really like the sequels, mentioned to them, even though I know most critics don't really like them. I know some of the sequels aren't good, but still anyway, the first movie is just a classic. It's definitely one of the best movies of all time. I mean, this movie wowed audiences back in 1993, and is one of the most successful franchises to this day with the new Jurassic World trilogy. In my opinion, Jurassic Park, there's no way stopping it, and in my opinion, it's definitely the number one best dinosaur movie of all time. And that was the list of all the dinosaur movies. I know there are a bunch more dinosaur movies out there, and including sequels and prequels and all that stuff, but there's too much to cover. I think this video will take long and longer. So I might eventually cover those films eventually, maybe in another ranking, but so far, these are all the dinosaur movies I can cover today. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy Jurassic Park's 30th year anniversary this year, and I also hope you have a great Jurassic June.